You told someone good news once. A promotion. A relationship that was finally going well. Something you had wanted for a long time and had quietly earned. They smiled when you said it. They used the right words. And somehow you left that conversation feeling smaller than when you walked into it. Nothing happened that you could point to. No insult. No argument you could replay later. There was a flatness in the voice. A congratulations that landed a half-second too late. A subject change that came a little too quickly. You told yourself you were imagining it. You spent the evening editing the memory, softening it, explaining it away. The feeling stayed. What you ran into was envy. Not your own. Theirs. And the reason it was so hard to name is that the person carrying it will do almost anything to keep it from being named, especially by themselves. If this is already landing, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from today. Friedrich Nietzsche had a name for what came off that person. He called it ressentiment. It is a French word he used on purpose, and it means more than ordinary resentment. It describes what happens inside someone who feels themselves at a disadvantage and can do nothing about it in the open. The honest response to wanting what someone else has is to go after it, or to let the wanting pass. Ressentiment is what grows when a person can do neither. They cannot close the gap, and they cannot admit the gap is there. So the feeling turns inward and curdles, and over time it builds something to live in. It builds a private story in which the person they envy is not better, but worse. Luckier, shallower, somehow undeserving. Nietzsche gave this mind a precise image. He said the man of ressentiment has a soul that squints. It cannot look at the thing directly. It has to come at everything from an angle. He told a parable for how the story gets written. The lambs resent the birds of prey for carrying them off. And since the lambs can never become birds of prey, they decide instead that the birds are evil and that they, the lambs, are good for being gentle. Strength gets renamed as cruelty. Weakness gets renamed as virtue. It helps to understand where the feeling comes from before you watch it operate. Nietzsche believed the deepest drive in a person is the will to power, the urge to grow, to extend, to become more than you were. That drive is not a flaw. It is the thing that gets a person out of bed. But when someone feels that drive blocked, when they want to rise and cannot find the way, the energy does not simply vanish. It looks for another outlet. The straightest outlet is to climb. The crooked one, when climbing feels impossible, is to pull the high thing down instead. Envy is the will to power that lost its nerve. It still wants the height. It has just given up on reaching it honestly and decided the next best thing is to make sure no one else keeps it either. That is the engine underneath everything that follows. Envy spoken out loud is just envy, and it tends to burn off. Envy that refuses to say its own name cannot stay envy. It has to turn into something more respectable. It becomes judgment. It becomes concern. It becomes the truth about you that they feel they owe to other people. The first sign is the smallest and the easiest to miss. They turn what you built into something that merely happened to you. You worked 2 years on a thing, and they describe it as a lucky break. You made a hard decision that paid off, and they call it good timing. The words are not hostile, and that is what makes them work. They quietly move the cause of your success from inside you to somewhere outside you, where it costs them nothing to admit. This is the lamb's logic in everyday clothes. If your success came from luck, then it says nothing about you and nothing about them. The distance between you stops being about effort or ability, which would sting, and becomes about fortune, which is no one's fault. Their picture of themselves survives untouched. You have probably heard it from a coworker who explains your promotion by the manager liking you, or a friend who reminds you, gently, that not everyone gets your opportunities. There is often some truth in it. There usually is. The tell is that luck is the only explanation they ever reach for, and only ever for you. The second sign sounds like praise. It is designed to. They congratulate you, but the sentence has a hook in it. I never expected this from you. You're so lucky things keep working out for you. Each one wraps a small cut inside a kind word, so that if you flinch, you become the difficult one. Nietzsche saw this clearly. Ressentiment cannot discharge itself directly, because saying it plainly would mean admitting the envy. So it leaks out sideways in the space between what is said and what is meant. The compliment is the disguise. The contempt is the cargo. Think of the person who answers your good year with, "Must be nice." 2 words, technically warm, and the temperature in the room drops anyway. You cannot object without looking ungrateful for a compliment that was never quite a compliment. That is the whole point of it. The backhanded remark exists because it hands the speaker deniability. They get to release the feeling and disown it in the same breath. The third sign turns your good fortune into a flaw in your character. Quietly, and always for your own good. Success changes people, they say. Money does something to a person. The concern sounds like care. Underneath, it is a verdict already reached. You have gained something, and that gain is being treated as a moral danger you are probably already failing. This is the slave revolt Nietzsche described, shrunk down to a single conversation. When you cannot match someone's strength, you can still attack the worth of strength itself. You make their advantage into a sin, so that having less becomes proof of being better. The one with less money becomes the one with more soul. The one who is passed over becomes the one who kept their integrity. You will know this from the relative who warns that you have changed, when what actually changed is that something finally went right for you. The warning is not really about who you are becoming. It is about who they need you to stay, so that the gap between you can keep meaning what they need it to mean. If this video is giving you something to think about, subscribe and turn on notifications. It helps us keep making content like this. The fourth sign is something you have to notice by its absence. It is the silence where acknowledgement should be. You share the thing you are proud of, and it simply does not land anywhere. No question about how it happened. No follow-up the next day. The conversation moves on as if you had mentioned the weather. People often miss this one because they are looking for an attack, and an attack never comes. What comes is nothing, and nothing is the message. Nietzsche understood that withholding can be its own act of will. For the person carrying ressentiment, your good news demand a response that costs them something. Genuine gladness would mean feeling, even for a moment, that your rising is good. That is the one thing the structure cannot allow. So instead of paying that price, they pay nothing. They let your news fall into the floor. The silence is not absent-mindedness. It is the cheapest possible way to deny you the thing that would have cost the most to give. You will recognize this in the friend who likes every ordinary post you make and goes quiet the moment you announce something real, or the family member who can talk for an hour until the subject becomes your win, and then suddenly has somewhere to be. The pattern is not random. Watch what consistently gets met with air. The fifth sign moves underground. To your face, they are warm. The moment you leave the room, the story changes. Nietzsche held a particular contempt for this, because it is ressentiment operating exactly as designed. The person cannot confront you, and would never want to, because open conflict carries risk and might expose the envy for what it is. So the feeling goes where it is safe. It goes to other people, in your absence, dressed as honesty. Have you noticed how they've been acting lately? I'm only saying this because I care. The gossip is not idle. It is the work of building a case, slowly, in rooms you are not standing in. What they're really doing is recruiting. A single envious person carries a private ache. A group that agrees with them carries a shared truth. If enough people can be brought to see you the way the envious person needs you to be seen, then the feeling stops being a personal failing and becomes a consensus. You will recognize this from the colleague who is friendly at your desk and quietly editorial everywhere else, or the friend whose warmth to your face never quite matches what filters back to you through other people. The two faces are not a contradiction. They're the same strategy viewed from different rooms. The sixth sign only shows itself when something goes wrong for you. Watch who softens when you fall. There are people whose kindness toward you runs exactly opposite to your fortunes. When you are climbing, they are cool, clipped, hard to reach. When you stumble, they arrive. Warm again, generous with their time, present in a way they never were when things were good. It is tempting to read this as loyalty, the friend who shows up in the hard season. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is something else wearing loyalty's face. For the person consumed by ressentiment, your setback is a relief because it closes the gap that tormented them. Your failure restores the order they needed all along. Their comfort is real in the moment, but it is comfort drawn from the wrong well. They're not soothing your loss. They're quietly metabolizing their own relief, and it happens to look like care. This is the sign that takes the longest to accept, because it asks you to doubt kindness that arrived right when you needed it. Pay attention to the pattern over years, not the gesture in the moment. The envious are dependable in your defeats and scarce in your wins. The shape only becomes visible from a distance. Before the last sign, a word of caution, because this is where people go wrong. Once you learn to see raisonnement, the temptation is to see it everywhere. Every critic becomes a hidden enemy. Every piece of hard feedback becomes envy in a costume. That is a trap of its own, and Nietzsche would have been the first to warn you off it. He valued honest opposition. He thought a worthy enemy was a gift, that being told the truth by someone who could see your faults clearly was one of the rarest forms of respect. So learn the difference. Honest criticism is specific. It points at the work, names the flaw, and often hands you something you can use. It tends to come to your face because the person wants the thing fixed, not the person diminished. Envy is vague, and it is personal. It goes after your worth rather than your work. It arrives sideways rather than straight, and it never quite offers you a way to be better, because being better was never what it wanted from you. If someone's hard words make you sharper, that is not envy. That is a friend. Keep them. The seventh sign is the quietest and the deepest, and it is the one the envious person will defend to the end, because admitting it would cost them everything they have built. They will never say the words. Not to you, and not to themselves. Nietzsche's sharpest insight was not that the envious lie to other people. It is that the lie has to start at home. The whole structure only works if the person believes their own story. They have to actually feel that your success is luck, that your good news is suspicious, that their coolness is discernment rather than envy. The disguise has to fool the one wearing it first. This is why you will never get the confession. Asking an envious person to admit envy is asking them to dismantle the one thing protecting them from a feeling they found unbearable. The whole apparatus, the luck talk, the backhanded praise, the concern, the silence, the gossip, exists precisely so the word never has to be spoken. To name it would be to feel it, and the feeling was the thing they could not survive in the first place. So the denial is not a tactic they have chosen. It is load-bearing. Pull it out, and the entire self-image comes down with it, which means the admission you've been half waiting for is not coming. Not because they are dishonest in the ordinary way, but because the truth is the one thing the structure was built to keep out. So the question is what you do with that, once you stop waiting for them to say it. The temptation is to expose it, to catch the envious person in the act, to lay the pattern out so plainly that they have no choice but to concede. It almost never works, and Nietzsche helps you see why. You are not arguing with a person who has misread the facts. You are arguing with a structure built specifically to keep those facts out. Push harder, and it does not crack. It thickens. The squinting soul does not learn to look straight because you held a mirror up to it. It learns to squint at the mirror. The shift is to stop needing the confession at all. Their denial was never evidence about you. It was always evidence about them. Once you see that the luck talk and the worried compliments and the warmth that only returns when you fall are all one mechanism, the mechanism loses its grip because its power depended on you taking it personally. The remarks were never measuring your worth. They were measuring the distance the other person could not stand. Nietzsche did not counsel forgiveness here, and this script will not pretend he did. He had a harder and more useful idea. He thought the higher response to raisonnement was not to retaliate and not to absorb it, but to become unable to be poisoned by it. He admired the person who could suffer an insult and simply not be wounded in the place the insult was aimed at, because they did not draw their sense of themselves from the people throwing them. Not forgiveness, something closer to immunity. That immunity is built on one quiet decision. You stop submitting your life for their approval, because you finally understand the approval was never available to give. The envious person cannot celebrate you, not because you have not earned it, but because your success is the exact thing their whole structure exists to deny. Waiting for them to be happy for you is waiting at a door that was bricked up before you arrived. He went further than withdrawal, though, and this is the part most people miss. Nietzsche's deepest answer to a world full of people who resent your rising was not to hide the rising. It was to keep going so completely, to live so fully into the thing you are becoming, that their judgment becomes irrelevant to you. He called the highest form of this amor fati, a love of your own fate, including the parts that drew the envy in the first place. You do not apologize for the life that made them uncomfortable. You commit to it harder. The person who is busy becoming what they are has no spare attention left for managing how that looks to the people who wish they were smaller. Self-overcoming, he called it. The work is on yourself, not on them. And it turns out that the more of yourself you become, the less their squinting can reach you. So you stop knocking. You let them keep their story because it was never really about you, and you go on living the life that generated the envy in the first place. There's a strange relief on the far side of this. The relief of stopping. You spend so long trying to be small enough that no one resents you, dimming the good news, apologizing for the win, talking yourself down so the room stays comfortable. Nietzsche thought that was the real tragedy of raisonnement. Not that it makes the envious miserable, though it does. That it can talk the people they envy into shrinking until everyone agrees to be smaller together. You do not owe anyone that. The people who cannot be glad for you have told you something true, just not the thing they meant to. They have shown you the size of the gap they cannot close. That is their weight to carry. It was never yours to make lighter by carrying less of your own life. Let them keep the squint. You keep the view. Thank you for watching. More videos are on your screen now, and if you haven't already, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.